I don't know who the chairman. I don't remember who the chairman is. Is it?
The chairman is the chairman.
Oh, okay. Let's call him. You have a. Yeah. I don't have the itinerary. Let's call the meeting to order for the audit committee on what's the date today?
October 7th.
Thank you. October 7th, 2015. This meeting is not being recorded.
Yes, it is.
Recorded but not televised, correct?
Yes, it is.
So it is being televised as well?
We had a conference about it, and we said, let's just televise it.
Okay, so I need to announce it's being televised. So
Yes.
the meeting's being televised.
In the back of your head's being televised.
Yeah, that's my better side. All right. Discussion and approval of minutes. Does anyone have any comments on the minutes? Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Minutes are approved. Update on the 2014 management letter. Findings and recommendations.
Okay, so we, as we have in the past, we'll start with we have the DPW operations review, which was separate from the management letter, but was included as part of the management letter. As we've talked about, Chapter 90 is actually working much better now, and we are getting reimbursement requests out in a timely manner from in working with Silvio, which is facilitating payments coming in a much timelier manner for us, which is a very positive thing. Kara and I are still working on the policies and procedures. Hopefully we'll be able to sit down shortly and kind of hammer all of that out. Surveillance, I haven't heard back from her on where she's at. I know she was working on quotes to install at the facility. I'm not 100% sure right now where she's at, whether she's actually planned for the money in the budget as of yet. We still are doing periodic audits of waste options, going every month to the scale house and shutting it down and counting the money, and they are on to the penny every month. The minutes reflected a request for us to come back to you with the question or the answer to the question about whether or not there was a certification for the scale had been done by the Seal of Weights and Measures, and it is posted in the scale house, so it has been done.
I actually checked that the last time I was there, so it is posted where it's visible.
I leave in progress the cash collections for the daily deposits, just to always remind myself to make sure that we're doing that on a daily basis. But the change with getting the deposits from waste options on a daily basis is working and working better. They do have the night drop box that we can use as well on the weekends, which is noted in down below into the landfill. So what we did, Jim, was we installed a drop box on the DPW that they can only access for weekends on the inside. So the collections are dumped into it, and then we are the only ones that can access it on Monday morning.
So as you're going through this, do you have I know it says in progress, but do you have a deliverable date set up, some kind of dates?
We've been the cash collections, the daily pickup, and the weekend. Like I said, I always leave them as in progress so that we don't ever forget about them, to continue to monitor and make sure that it's happening. The written policies, I have to get back with Kara and find out when she can be ready for, because that's something that's kind of not been able to get to at this point. I will send out an email with a date about the cameras and more information when I talk to her, which may be tonight too, before the meeting. Accounts receivable, we continuously are reviewing it. We personally, or the finance department does get the balances from DPW every month. We are in the process of still trying to formalize an actual write-off policy, but they are aggressively pursuing collection still at this point. So my goal would be for the write-off policy to have it done by the end of the year, so we could come forward to the board with whatever requisite number has to be written off.
Days in
Huh?
Do you know your days in accounts receivable?
We haven't actually done it on that basis because, for one reason, Jim, is there's some substantial stuff for people that have gone out of business and left the island, so it would be extremely skewed with that. So,
But you haven't written that off?
well, there's no formal write-off policy, which I'm going to have hopefully by the end of the year
So
written.
the answer is no, you have not written it off.
No, we have not written it off yet. Commercial landfill bills are on schedule to go out in November, as we have noted here. The first ad for the public hearing was in the October 1st paper, and it will be run subsequent on the 8th and the 15th, with the hearing scheduled for the 21st.
And that's a hearing on.
At your board, yes. So then, once
And is there any, do we have increases?
proposed 2.5%. So should you look favorably upon that recommendation, then we'll advertise as required, and then the bills will go out in November. So we will hit that, as we had promised.
Before we go on,
Yeah.
I just want to ask a question. Have we looked at, or is it possible for these accounts receivables to have an online payment method?
We are. What we're going to do is, we have a part-time person that was going to be focused on that. Elizabeth is currently re-advertising for the position. When that is done, we have set up online lock boxes that will allow people to pay online via check or credit card, which will get the money out of the
I
DPW.
mean, a lot of people pay their bills
What we're-
electronically now, and
What we're trying to do is get all of it's about $3 million, and we're trying to get it away from them, and we've set up lock boxes, and that's what one of this person's primary responsibility is, that we will be doing. So as soon as Elizabeth has hired the person, which hopefully will be in the next 30 days or less.
okay.
So it might be helpful for you to look at the way the competitor on Island is managing the relationship between their customers when it comes to billing. Just see if they do, whatever they do. I mean, he's pretty customer friendly, and it might be, you probably want to make sure there's no barriers in your system processes that would lead people to choose him versus the town.
Well, the biggest difference there, Jim, is that he has one rate and the landfill has another, and his rate is substantially less. Now, I say that for like someone like myself who's a small contractor who doesn't have an immense amount of C&D, I can go to Miles and pay $2.50 a ton. If I go to the landfill, I have to pay $3.61 or whatever their rate is. It's more than Miles, substantially.
So why does anybody use the landfill?
A lot of them aren't. More and more are going to
Why
Miles.
does anybody?
Well, the
There's a
landfill
volume
has,
discount for the large users.
right, so like Tuscana, for example, is taking all of their waste to the landfill because they have a separate deal, which we have no idea what that rate is. They won't tell us that. We've asked.
You might want to develop a pricing strategy based on.
It's not up to us, though. It's up to them, right?
No, it's up to us,
No.
but we work with them to do
But
it.
you might want to sit with them and say, because you're in business together, but then
Yeah, we have had those discussions.
you could even, if you want to, what your strategy is, if you really make big adjustments to the pricing. Thanks.
Jim, I would say, my impression so far is that they know that, they're not immune to that, and that makes me think they've decided that working with one or two large customers is part of profit maximization. And
I think they're actually-
Small guys don't have enough options, and they're sort of saying, tough luck, you keep paying. and
I
what
believe their
this
volume
do."
is up since
Right,
Miles opened.
It's overall up on the island, but they've done reasonably well.
Right. They didn't lose
Strategy,
anywhere.
They are aware of these.
There, there's also some material that use does not take.
Right.
Okay. Well, whatever, it's a,
And
so you're in the business.
I mean, Miles doesn't just take anyone either. So a lot of people don't have an option.
But you
They have
can't
to.
take everybody.
Right, he'll take specific contractors. I don't think he's really looking, from what I gather, for any more new clients. He's got all he can handle, so. I think we lost one major commercial hauler to him. I think Santos went to him.
Which was gonna happen up front, we all knew that.
I think the rest of them stayed. Tuscana was a big feather, because Tuscana was doing their own thing. So when Tuscana started using the landfill, it was a substantial increase for them. Yeah. And they have some type of deal where they take it, then Tuscana hauls it off for them, so. Sorry.
No, that's fine. No problem at all. So with respect to the sewer, I'll have to give you a formal date because we didn't originally get to the date that we were supposed to, and they're still in process. I'll send an email out with a formal date when we will have those ready for review. The same with septic conversions in the application fees, which I know Kara has implemented some changes, but we'll get formal documentation, and I'll send an email out with the date when we'll have it. Hopefully it will be by the next audit committee meeting for some of this. Some of the
This
smaller
sort of
stuff.
ties back into the new hookups and
Right.
the
Yeah. Sewer turnovers had been a problem with respect to the timing from the clerk there to when we were receiving them. That has been corrected, and they're coming down at least on a weekly basis, so they're more timely, and which is working. So.
Just in terms of that, I'm not sure it's a relevant thing right now, but at some point, we can make sure, what is it, a 6-month guideline, Libby, between the time and the counties for to hook up and they have to hook up? Or something like that.
Something.
And the question is for the health department.
Okay.
Are those hookups actually occurring?
You mean if sewer becomes
The
available?
sewer,
I think it's 18 months.
how many letters we sent out, how many hooked up, at least are they within the terms authorized, that's all.
Yeah, you can ask Roberta about that.
Okay. Okay. So the operational review, which actually took place at I copied DPW twice by mistake. So.
Okay, I was wondering.
The 2 pages,
No,
yeah.
I just did that.
No, the payroll review, the work group, as had discussed, is somewhat on hold because we went through an operational review of payroll with Munis to kind of get an idea which is also noted in the management letter notes as well. But we just went through it recently. It was both general ledger and payroll and HR. So we're awaiting the report for the recommendations on how to streamline it through Munis, which will solve some of these.
It's sort of the hope that Munis may have had things that we could utilize that
Right.
weren't, that might help us.
Yes.
out.
So there was the hope, and when they sat not only with Krista all day, but they sat with HR all day as well, and on 2 different days. And the hope is that they'll give us ways to process it more efficiently, and if there's things within the modules that we didn't turn on or we're not using, that those will be used, which will help us do track things more efficiently. They made one recommendation when we were here, which created an immense amount of efficiencies for us in terms of the way we were handling the accruals, because we had to manually remember to go in and post it to everybody every month. There's a simple toggle that you can set the date and then tell it when it's supposed to do it, and it automatically does it for you. So that is an actual really big time saver, and will also make the accruals even more accurate so that we're having to remember to put them on. So the initial assessment from my point of, I have the general ledger report, I don't have payroll yet, but the initial assessment from everybody that Krista and payroll, was that it was really helpful, and we're looking forward to seeing what they have given us, what else that can help us, because payroll is one of the most intricate and time-consuming processes that we run, and it needs to be streamlined in some ways.
So you're looking at a payroll timekeeping system within Munis?
Where we're looking at twofold. What we have right now is with police and our island home have what's known as it's called VCS, but they have specific software related to different types of functions. The police use what's known as police officer scheduling system through them, and it has a payroll module component. So they're using that. Our island home uses it as well. We today are executing a purchase order because we had money to do this, to roll the fire out on it, and then we're going to roll DPW on it. So we're going to try to encompass our 4 most intricate and difficult payrolls outside of Munis on this, and then I'm working with Steve, the new HR director, to hopefully roll out in the next 6 months the time reporting in Munis, if it works the way we believe it's going to work for all the other departments. So we'll get away from paper, which is my goal, and get away from too many manual inputs, which will make the process a lot better.
But you're not thinking about changing your timekeeping system?
No. And the thing about with VCS is it does upload directly into Munis, so we can use for the less intricate departments Munis, and for the more intricate ones where we need a lot of rules written, this one, which we know works, and it'll port directly in via a CSV file. So the employee hiring process documentation is actually with Amanda and Steve. We had written it a while ago, and it is still being reviewed. Actually, I skipped them, sorry. So Fair Labor Standards Act was completed and is being done correctly at this point. The personnel action forms, everybody is using the same standard form. There was a time period where we weren't, but now everybody is on the same form. It's being handled by HR, which makes the process much smoother. The employee step increases, the review's been done, and the HR department sends us them around to department heads and to us on in a time frame that does allow us to get to the payroll instead of having to do numerous retroactive pays, which was one of the auditor's findings, that there was a lot of retroactive pays because they weren't being done timely, or we didn't know exactly when they needed to be done. And the employee benefit form, I'd actually have to look. I have it checked off. I know that we are currently directing all employees to HR. We're trying to handle less benefit questions in-house here and more at HR, because that's really where it should reside rather than personnel. And that builds some consistency in the answers that are given out, so versus coming to us and then going to HR.
You may not have the scale, but there are a lot of self-service, benefit self-service options that you could do, like through PeopleSoft or some other systems. And so in a way that people take responsibility for setting up their own.
Well, we do direct them to the websites of the various vendors that we use. Like, you can go to Blue Cross and to any of the other voluntary benefits. We can sign up, or you can sign up with paper, so we do utilize that. Training, which I did briefly touch on here.
What were the issues in the hiring process?
Well, it was really that it was not really formalized on the whole process on how to go, so what we're trying to do is standardize it, and there were some forms that we had been using that we didn't, like the personnel exemption, or the hiring exemption form. There were some forms that didn't need to be used, so we're really, right, so that policy that we wrote, that Amanda and Steve are reviewing, is really to formalize and make it consistent across the board. Training, so just to expand on the Munis visit, what will come out of that next is a recommendation on the training, and as we move forward through the budget process for 17, I will, to the extent possible, include some training in there, and if we have funds available as we move forward in 16, I'll schedule, to the extent we can, training now so that we can start to utilize Munis better, because I don't envision switching from Munis anytime soon. So. File security, the files still are locked every single night, and before I leave, I do a haphazard check to walk in to make sure that they are locked. And the door behind me is locked as well, so there's no access to the room. In my office, yes. So there's no access to the files once you need a key combination to get in, but before I leave, I always walk through to make sure that they are locked as well.
Is there a policy on other files, like I guess the personnel department has a similar?
Their door is locked, and every time I've been in there, the files are locked, so I believe they have the same policy as we do, so. We do review payroll before it's submitted. I review payroll to make sure that the transmittals to the input to the output does agree. So we are reviewing it. We're working towards a process where there's more than one person doing it all the time, but I do review it internally. I review ours all the time anyway. So, and since we have been trying to work closer with the departments, I think the number of employee issues that have come to my attention have decreased. So there's not as many people coming in complaining as of right now. So that's a very good thing, since it is one of the most important, if not most important, thing we do.
So do you have a policy that if the employee is overpaid, you have the ability to make an adjustment?
We would make an adjustment in the next pay period, automatically, yes, if we found that to be the case. Outsourcing is something that we're still looking at, but I want to get some of this other stuff in place before we really make a concerted effort to say, yeah, let's do it or let's not. I want to see how this works a little bit, because we are making some substantive changes that I think will enhance the process that we're using right now. So
So what was your finding in the management letter?
when they did the operational review, they made a suggestion, because of the complexity and the size of the payroll and everything, that it would be a good idea to look at outsourcing to see if it was feasible or not. Before we really leap forward with that, I want to see how all these changes we're making actually do come together, because I think some of them will actually have a positive impact in the payroll process and make things easier.
So then you're at least comparing an outsource to the best
To the
internal system we could have to do.
right. So that's what I would like to do.
Well, and the outsourcing has the issue of, will the checks get here
On time.
So
And
that's,
everybody's not direct deposit?
no.
You don't require that?
There's some conflicting interpretations on whether I legally can force everybody to do it or not.
It has to be bargained, is what we've understood. and there's a couple
Oh,
of
okay.
things.
Right, so,
You could maybe have remote printing or something, I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
Actually,
Yeah, there's got to be a way. There's other islands, so there's got to be a way to.
So there's, what's the payroll company that, Paycheck? Paycheck?
well, like Paychecks, there's Harper's, which is a big one.
So Paycheck, when I worked at the academy, we had Paycheck, and they were it's very easy to do. I did it, and they never missed the checks were always there.
Yeah, and I actually, I'll bring it the next time. The MGFOA, one of the people in Massachusetts did a survey of outsource versus insource and who you're using. And the majority of the communities still do it internally, and the majority of them use Munis, which I found kind of interesting. So there is less outsourcing than when I was involved in it, even in Millbrae. So I think some communities are actually bringing it back in-house
Back in.
to have control over it. Okay, so the management letter. The first informational comment was the pension standards, which the auditors have received the report and have reviewed it, and it meets the requirements that we need for the pronouncements for the audit. The bond rating, as some of you may know, we are going back out to market for November to do some permanent borrowing and then do some additional school money. We just had a ratings call. They have reaffirmed our AA1. We had a lengthy discussion with them about whether or not we would ever get to AAA. They've given us a few marching orders on how we may get there, but
That's real
it's a long road to get there.
No, I don't
but-
mean AAA, what you've got now.
Oh,
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's very,
So the unemployment filings, the correct rate is still being used. I do review that, and we are looking at those prior to going in. So we had that management letter comment about the wrong rate and other information on them being incorrect, but that has been corrected. Health insurance trusts, the codes should have been set up, and we should have done the allocation or are in the process of doing the allocation to present to the auditors for the end of year with the revenue codes between employee and town portion of the fund balance. Personal property tax, motor vehicle, and boat excise. This finding was related to there's some very old years on the audit, on the balance sheet still. We had intended to have it done in July. We actually are going bill by bill with the deputy tax collector to make sure which bills he has and which ones he doesn't have, because we don't want to write off something that we shouldn't write off. And personal property tax actually has to go through the overlay as an abatement, so we would need this assessor to declare some overlay surplus and then ask town meeting to allocate it to the fiscal years so that we can create to do those abatements. So that actually will take town meeting action to help us do, but we will do it by the April town meeting. If not, I'm not going to ask for it on the November town meeting. You're not going to get it. So I'm not gonna get it, and I got told I'm not asking for it, so, so that will be done, this year, but we have discussed.
You're not gonna get it on the town meeting.
Oh, okay.
You're not gonna get it.
But we have discussed that with the auditors, and they're in agreement
Right.
with the way we're doing to plan to do it. As of right now, I didn't hear any issues with the way the munis reports were run. They were working on receivables today, so.
Right, we're still looking at it,
Yeah,
so.
but we believe the reports were run at the right time frame so that there wasn't need for a reconciling spreadsheet like we had discussed. For fiscal, what is this for? This is for 14, okay. All of the prior year reconciling items had been cleared. We worked really hard to make sure that there weren't any in this year's audit either, and I don't expect that there's going to be any at this point. We did hit a closing schedule that actually had everything to me by the 7th. We have submitted timely to DOR all the reports that are currently due to them, and we are in the process of finalizing the free cash to be submitted to them for certification. They will be out here on the 15th of October. And
Hopefully they'll get it certified for us for April.
Want free cash?
it will be certified well in
They've
advance.
been pretty
of-
good. Yeah, they've been really good about it, so.
So,
We're telling them we have a special town meeting, so it will be certified before that frame, because they focus on people who have special town meetings to get it done, so. And we internally, the capital projects, this was brought up as because there were some borrowings that had small amounts of dollars left that had been unexpended because the projects had been closed. We do review every quarter, Heidi does, the balances, and we reappropriate as necessary and as able to. And if there's anything attached to a borrowing before we move forward to reappropriate it, we do discuss it with First Southwest to make sure where we're planning on reappropriating it is appropriate and allowed on the borrowing that we did.
So I know recently you often have warrants at town meeting. You do that? Is that what this is about? Or is it?
Well, what this was is that on the balance sheet, if we have a capital appropriation that had a borrowing attached to it, the article may still have an unexpended balance. And so the auditors wanted us to make sure that we were looking to make sure that we didn't run afoul of first any arbitrage rules of having the money and not having expended it. But what we do is we also look to reappropriate it if we can, based
Does
on.
that come to as an article?
Yes, it does come to, it comes to you.
You've been doing that for years.
We have, but when there's some on there, they like to remind us that we should be looking at it to make sure, so. It's not something that we hadn't been doing, it's something we
Why
have,
isn't this completed?
because we always do it. So anything we're continuously doing, it's always in progress every year, in my mind. I'd be
I
happy to
think-
check it off as completed.
Yeah, I think Jim's point was that some of them went back to '04.
Okay.
I think that was his, so that should have been completed, back when the process started. I think that's what he's trying
Yes,
to.
maybe the next time we have an audit meeting, you can give us an update as to where we're at.
Sure. I'll give you what's left to be reappropriated.
But, I remember, and I may be completely misrepresenting this, but it seemed like when we bailed the airport out, we had balances of appropriations all over the place
Mm-hmm, yeah.
that we used to bail them out. I mean, it was going back like, some of them 10 years,
Yeah.
there's a lot of
300,000.
Yeah,
I think that's how it
It just seems like it's a recurring thing.
Well, it's not so much that it's a reoccurring thing, it's that when you go to town meeting, and people look at it and go, what is this 400,000 from 2006 or 2008 or whatever? It'd be nice if we,
Yeah. So I'll put the list together, a schedule of what's unspent and what could be, because we do have that, we go over it quite frequently.
Yeah, and I think that the lingering ones, there might be 2 or 3, maybe. One of them, as an example, is, I think it started out as a $250,000, maybe it's 500, I can't remember exactly, for the fuel tank farm bulk fuel study. And that was from, I think, 2004. We didn't even start doing that until 2 years ago-ish. But now it's active and it's getting used and it's a project well.
it'd just be nice to have a list.
Yeah.
The other thing we're going through as part of this year's audit is taking a closer look at the special revenue funds, because we're noticing some of those are rolling forward without any activity, so we're, going through and going to identify those for you folks, just to say, hey, take a closer look at this. Was there a coding error in the past, or has someone forgotten that they have some money there that they can spend? And these don't carry the arbitrage issues or anything like that. So, I've got one of my guys, Paul, going through.
Right, and we had actually,
through that.
we had started looking at them too, because there's a lot,
Yeah.
I think there's more with the school than there is on the
Yeah.
town side that have a lot of just rolling with no activity.
They could possibly be stagnant, yeah.
Right, right, well, it could be revolvers, it could be donation accounts that they've
Yeah.
never utilized. Those are all special revenue accounts at once, like a donation, once it's accepted, they can spend it without further appropriation, but there's some that have just no activity.
And they may not know about it, so it's,
Are we talking about a fair amount of money here, or is it?
it may add up to something. I mean, like I said, we're just looking at it, so I can't
Yeah.
give you an estimate, but it may add up to something.
Okay. That it?
I think Tony's gonna talk briefly about 2015,
Yep.
and I'll probably have a couple
Status
comments.
of the 2015 audit.
Okay, so we began the audit. Normally we do our interim testing in May, where we go through your transactions and do selections and make sure the system is operating properly. And no major issues in that part of the audit. Then now we do what's called the end of year, where Brian has closed the books and is handing us the books, so we go in and verify the cash and the receivables and the debt and all the year-end balances. One thing we also did this year, because we had a lot of problems with the school student activities 2 years ago, is we talked with Mike Kozart and said, can we come in and do an update? You seem to have made a lot of fixes and cleanup. Do you want us to come in and do an update? So he agreed to have us come in and do that. So that's what we've been in the process of doing. So on the student activity side, there are a lot of good improvements. One thing I'd like to see is them working with the town a lot better. And I'm not saying it's a school problem or a town problem, it's a process problem that I've communicated to Brian. What's happened is part of the student activities the town treasurer maintains, and part of it the school maintains. So you have to work together to make sure they reconcile. And that's not happening right now. So that's something that I've emphasized to them, and I've talked to Mike about. So that's something that Brian's already working on, some sort of a process. Martin is new at the school, so Mike's going to involve him in the process. And they're also bringing in a new bookkeeper. So instead of having the secretaries of the principals, who are not financial people, handle the student activities, they're having one bookkeeper come in and do all the accounting for all 3 schools. So it's about a 15-hour-a-week job.
What is Martin's position here? Is he their
Called the
financial?
Chief Financial Officer.
So it's good that, in some ways, it's bad that we lost him, but it's good that he understands Munis and he's going over there. He understands the process that you have in place.
It's bad that we lost him. I think it's an opportunity for us to work even more collaboratively than we were able to with Glenn in terms of some other things, in terms of making sure that one of the things that we've encountered prior, and it's still something in 15, and we're working, I've discussed it with Martin, is the grants. What runs through Munis will not always agree to what the prior person in Martin's seat had submitted all the time for reimbursement, and so we had some trouble reconciling those back and forth. So Martin and I have had preliminary discussions on how we can work collaboratively better together to make sure that everything is in agreement on both sides. So I do think there's an opportunity there with him, because he does and especially from a perspective, he understands more of how I would like things done
That's what I'm
to
saying.
me. So
I mean,
He knows your expectations.
Yeah.
in my mind, and maybe I'm off the mark here, but whether it's the school or it's one of the enterprise funds, ultimately, you're the chief.
I
They
agree.
have to do it your way. If
That's
they're
right.
not, we need to get them to do it
That's
your
right.
way. You know, I
So we
mean,
have to populate all this
well,
Yeah.
or just
Doing the schools.
sit down,
No, it's-
sit them down or their boss and say, hey, look, you're not, whether you think you're doing it right or not, this is how we want you to do it. This is the protocol. and you need to do it.
especially with the enterprise funds, I have to say, like, use the airport because we talked about it before. Jamie works very collaboratively with us and works very diligently to make sure that the stuff is the way we need it. So I have constant communication.
Collaboration isn't the same as oversight and direction.
Well, right, so, and we do, I mean, if we talk to her about how it has to be done and how we need to, so, and if she has questions, she does reach out to us about how to properly do it so that it's correct. So I think we have it with the airport, I think we have a good relationship with the water company, and I think that, again, although I'm sad to see Martin leave from our side,
Improve our relationship.
I think it's going to help in terms of the collaboration and making sure that the flow of information is correct and things are being done the way we need to.
Well, like a great example of that is yesterday I was at the elementary school, and I asked them if they had, reconciled with the town. And they said, no, we never get anything from the town. So what happened was Martin ran some reports out of Munis, gave them to him, and I sat there with the elementary school and we reconciled them. So that's a good example of where Martin can actually get things. And
And you probably made them feel good.
And then
Yes.
after,
Yeah.
Oh, this is great.
it was easy. They saw how easy it was, especially at the elementary school. The elementary school has very little activity, so it shouldn't be that difficult. The high school has a lot going on, and they've done a nice job. They have a new person over there handling the student activities, and the bookkeeper will take that over. But she didn't understand the whole reconciling. Again, she said, I don't know what the interest is. I don't know if there's bank charges. I
so
don't know.
we actually, Tony and I had this discussion yesterday, and I've already worked with Deb on how we're going to go forward from here in creating a schedule that we will transfer back and forth to have that, to make sure that the two balances equal the detail, and so that it'll be much cleaner and everybody will have an understanding of where everybody's at.
I'm going to ask a fool's question here because I just don't know the answer. Do we have to do the same thing with the land bank, or are they completely separate from the town with their money in their account? Do they go through us?
Well, they're part of the county, so, well, they're I guess, a component.
I think
But I don't-
we have never done anything.
we've never
They have
done-
their own auditors.
Okay.
So we've never
done
We just
anything.
recently got their audit statement.
We just, right, we got their audited
But,
financials, but
So we review that as county commissioners, not?
No, you don't even review these kind of commissioners. They're
So they have no,
Totally separate.
Right,
and who oversees them?
the land bank commission.
Their board, the
And
elected
ultimately the
commissioners,
state?
and I guess the state, but primarily they hire an outside external auditor, the same way we
Mhm.
do, to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do.
And that report goes to their board.
yeah, and we get a copy, so if you want a copy. I
It-
can
No,
read
I'm
it
just
for
was
you.
curious.
We roll it up into the CAFA.
Right.
This year was really interesting because the pension that Brian had talked about, 67, 68, when we got the information from the actuary, it only came as one number, county. So we had to work with their auditors
talked about that the last
figure
audit
out,
meeting.
to figure out what the land bank piece was and the county piece was. And a lot of interesting things popped out of this conversation, that is it really its own entity, or is it a department of the county? And a lot of things I was unaware of. And we went back to read the original legislation, and that's a little vague, the Enabling Act. So it's a little confusing. I don't know if they are their own, like, tax reporting, or, I don't know.
Well, if you have a question, then it's worth some investigation.
Well, I just want to make sure, that we're not paying for any expenses that they should be incurring through the county.
So do they actually then, so we can find out easily enough, do they write a check to Barnstable?
Yes,
for their
they
pension
they do.
obligation?
Well,
They-
you write the check
we
out of
write
the
the
county,
check,
and they
but
reimburse
They
it.
reimburse, well, they reimburse
And
the
the same
county.
thing for the health insurance and
Yes.
retirement.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. All
So
of
as long
those,
as those numbers are correct, we're fine.
yes, they are covering those. So the county writes the check and the land bank reimburses the county for their portion of the
Is
retirement.
the audit electronic? If it is, you might just send it around. People can look at it if they want to.
And so we talked about the student activities, the land bank. I think we talked about it at the last meeting, was we did a number of cash handling. We walked around, and there were some issues over at the clerk's office, and some with school lunch that we will end up reporting in the management letter. Most of the other departments we looked at, AudCom at the landfill. We looked at the treasurer collector's cash drawers, and a couple others that I can't recall off the top of my head, worked out to the penny. So they worked out to the penny. So there'll be some commentary in the management letter
And we,
on that process.
to that point, we actually have a new assistant treasurer that started, and now that she's ramping up, one of her roles is going to be to go and do this on at least at worst quarterly, hopefully every month, to everybody to make sure that we don't have this, like a couple of spots recur.
Were the issues with the town clerk's office recurring issues?
What do you mean by recurring?
Have they happened before?
Well, they don't, when we do an audit, we don't go in and audit every department, otherwise it would take
Oh, so this
10
is
years.
very-
So we do a cycle audit. So last time we went in and looked at the landfill and the payroll. This time we went in and looked at the town clerk and some of the other departments. So, but it was, when you say recurring, it is a practice they followed.
So it's-
Have they changed it?
They are turning it over timely, like they have. I haven't personally gone down and counted the bag, but we could make a surprise visit.
The biggest issue I had was they didn't use the register.
Right, and
They
that's
just had a
been-
box.
See numbers
Right.
or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they just had a box and
And that's
nothing was
been, the register's
numbered.
been programmed, and
Nothing was
I would have to check
numerical.
the next time I'm in to see if they're using it.
So that was the big thing. So you couldn't reconcile, so when we went there to count the register, you couldn't do it.
You couldn't-
You couldn't do it, so, so that needs to be cleaned up a little bit. So we'll comment on those things. On the financial side, I know this is, Brian, we talked about it, but there have been some things in the financial records. Last year, we talked about some errors that occurred because the review wasn't done timely, and some of these errors are continuing. So, we're going to probably still continue to write about some of the accounting things that I think Brian's got some ideas on how he wants to address things, but it might be a little premature now until we've really put our hands
Can you
around
give
it.
us an example of the stuff that did?
Sure, there were some entries that, to give you an example, we do an accrual every year to take the June 30th payable warrant that's paid on July 15th. We did a journal entry to book it to accounts payable so that we wouldn't have a giant cash reconciling item. We, for whatever reason, thought that we should just post it all to the general fund, even though we had the documentation that showed all 10 funds that it should have been posted to. So, Tony and I have talked about this. It certainly is, we need to continue to do better on the documentation of, and how we're getting to this, and think these things through a little clearer. This was a situation where I did say, if we were unsure how to do it, come talk to me. We shouldn't just automatically put it somewhere. If you're not sure how to do it, come and talk to me, and we'll walk through it to make sure that it's right. I mean, it's more just, I think it's more people, being 1 year, there were just some things that should have been recorded that we, as I was doing some of the review after we had already turned things over, some of the stuff over to them that they had requested, had found them that, okay, we didn't do this. So we are working on recreating the closed cycle to make sure that this doesn't happen, because this is not really what I envisioned happening this year, to be honest with you. And it's not going to be this way next year. I mean, everybody has,
So is the question, were any of these result in any kind of misrepresentation of the financials?
Well, the insurance was, forgetting to book the liability
Well,
on
we
the
did, yeah.
insurance. And so there is some,
Well-
errors that we had to
And
adjust.
were any of them related to lack of internal controls,
I wouldn't say internal controls, more,
diligence, or
I think a lack of understanding the,
so
yeah.
there's a training component? maybe?
I think there's yes,
really what it is
absolutely.
that we've already started it. Once this, we've talked about this since Monday. We've already started jotting down what needs to be done on a monthly basis in a closed cycle to make sure that we're doing it. The health insurance is, I think part of the problem is it's required to be, it's the only fund that we have to keep in absolute accordance with GAAP.
Yeah.
And it's a little different than every other fund, so since most people in our roles don't think about GAAP accounting versus UNIS accounting, it's the one that probably is the more likely to possibly slip if we don't have it jotted down where it needs to be done. So it is something that's already been written down and formalized about what we need to do on
We talked about creating a checklist,
Yeah.
because the health insurance.
The closed checklist.
Yeah, the health insurance thing came up 2 years ago, and we went through it with the accounting department at that time and said, this is how you have to do it, and everybody understood. And last year, it was right, it was correct. And this year, it went back to what it was.
Which I
So,
can't quite figure out
that's-
why.
that's-
So I have to get to that
Things
route
don't
first.
happen that often, you revert back to.
Right.
Just-
If you're doing
So
it once
it's-
at the end of
it's,
each year. So I think a closed checklist that says, did you remember to make the July health insurance payable for June? Did you remember to do the warrants payable in every fund? You know, a closed checklist for that, and I think would be very, very
Yeah,
helpful.
and one of the other things that has come out of this, I mean, I was able to walk through with the auditors to get to it, but one thing that's really come out of this, after going through this whole year in this close with everybody, is that we need to internally work better on the documentation to get to the numbers. It's not that the number isn't right, it's that we need to
The
have
journal
a
entries
little bit
need-
better documentation.
Need something behind, say, this is why we made it.
So, this is all internal stuff that everybody in the offices has heard me discussing with individuals, and globally, on Friday, we're gonna have a debrief after they're gone. And I've told everybody we have the next 7.5 months to work on the schedules that need to be done and get the closed schedule buttoned up so that this doesn't ever, these types of small, I call them small, but they're more errors of omission, I think, than anything else, don't
Would it be
occur.
appropriate for the audit committee to ask for that?
I'll be happy to give you the closed schedule when it's done. Sure.
Whenever you-
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely. I'd be more than happy to provide that to you so you can see it.
And there's a lot happening in this town, that's why it's important. Each of these enterprise funds, it's like its own little company, so you've got 6 or 7 of those that you have to worry about, as well as the town, and then you got the school that's its own basic entity, so it's really important to have something documented that gets you there. And I think so far, that's where we're at on the.
So it sounds like we're making progress.
You're nice.
Well, no, I mean, the last audit, I've only been to 2 of these meetings, but the last one, I remember, the DPW and the landfill was a nightmare, and it seems like we
Yeah,
cleaned
no,
that
it's,
up. So-
there are, I think I would have liked to have seen the steps progress quicker,
Right.
but it's better than what it was. And let's look at a 24-month snapshot. It's way better than it was 24 months ago.
But our expectations increase.
Yeah.
We absolutely can do better, and you know, I'm saying that because we can,
Because
and,
you've done such a great job, it's like, well, now we can.
well,
No,
no,
Well, and you've lost Martin too, so now you've got,
Before we had
a key guy out of the department.
no clue.
I mean, we
But it might help us in the long run.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, we've made progress in some areas, and we have other areas that we need to continue that progress and build on it and put a little bit better system in place.
And I know you're probably beating yourself up more than any of us.
Well, he knows me
Yeah.
pretty well, so
No.
he can expand if he wants on that one, but, so,
Next meeting, suggestions?
I had written down in my book, the 27th at 9, and also
27th
10th
of,
October.
I'm not here.
I'm not here
Okay,
either.
so I think that's a holdover from when we were trying to meet the last
yeah, I
Tuesday.
think we're going to quarterly, Libby, so.
Yeah, we can do
You
that.
want to talk to November, December?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I would
if we
say,
need anything
I would say by the
else.
beginning of December, we'll have everything wrapped up, and I think that'd be a good time to probably get a draft. We'll have a good draft that
So
we can
that
talk
first or
about.
second week of December would be good? What do you think?
Does the Wednesday day work for everyone?
Well, can I just say, Wednesday the 9th is our budget presentation to the board, so I'd really rather not do it then,
Okay.
just in case there's final
Do
things.
you want to do it the week after, or is that too
The
late?
16th, does that work for people? Does that work for you, Tom?
Yeah,
Potentially we
3
could
o'clock?
do it.
Is that
you know,
fine?
That's fine with me. I'm trying to do all these little odd meetings on the same day, so I don't have
Yeah.
to take off half a day from work every day.
November 16th?
No, December.
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 Plus, we might be having a special town meeting on November.
That's fine.
How do things look on the December 16th, Wednesday at, what's better, morning or afternoon?
doesn't matter, because I'll probably Skype it from my office, so,
3 o'clock's fine with me if it works for everybody else.
What do you have?
there in the
They
morning,
should be down
and
there.
they should be done.
How about 3? Does that work?
Just the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks
That's
good.
good.
Fair.
Let's do it.
Right, you'll have to get the schedule set up.
I will, make sure.
Hopefully you'll have somebody for that.
So, we will have somebody by then.
Anybody have anything else? Motion to adjourn? Second?
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Good, thank you.